Episode 6, The Queen Unbound. Scene 1, The Ordinary Door.
With our cone gone and the machine reduced to scrap, there was only the glass enclosure left. Up close, it no longer resembled a sanctum or a prison forged for legends. Without dramatic light or humming circuitry, it revealed itself as something far more mundane. An awkward, cramped container. The glass was smudged, the frame scuffed, one corner bore a dent that no one had ever bothered to repair. Inside, the Queen sat very still. Teddy approached the door. He did not raise his hands, he did not summon force or incantation, he simply examined the lock. For a moment, he traced its edges with his eyes, reading the mechanism the way a builder reads grain in wood. Then he found it, a small, recessed handle, dulled by use, overlooked because it was unremarkable. He wrapped his fingers around it and turned. The door opened with a heavy, ordinary creak. No smoke spilled out, no light burst forth, only a faint rush of stale air escaped the enclosure. A muted exhale, as if the container itself were relieved. The scent of confinement drifted briefly into the chamber before dissolving into the cleaner breath of the dreamworlds. Inside, the Queen recoiled. She pressed herself deeper into the narrow space, shoulders curling inward, eyes sharp with expectation. This was the moment she knew well, the door opening not to free her, but to punish her. Or to parade her fear as proof that terror had been justified all along. She laughed, brittle and tired. "Well," she said bitterly, "go on, then, tear me apart, if it helps you feel safe." Lucy stood beside Teddy. Her hands hung loosely at her sides, her stance was open, unguarded. "No," Lucy said, "we don't need you for that anymore." The words did not accuse, they did not absolve, they simply stated a fact. The Queen blinked. For the first time since the door had opened, uncertainty crossed her face. Not fear of pain, but confusion at its absence. The monster our cone had displayed, magnified and framed and justified by machinery, shrank back into something smaller, something breathing, something human. The glass door remained open, no one pushed her out, no one dragged her forward, the barrier had been removed. What came next was no longer mechanical, it was a choice.
Scene 2, The Weight of Being Unneeded.
For a long moment, nothing happened. No chains were fastened, no verdict was spoken. The Queen remained where she was, half shadowed by the open doorway, waiting for something. Anything. That would tell her who she was meant to be next. But the chamber held its neutrality. No one rushed forward to strike her. No one knelt in mercy or begged forgiveness on her behalf. The stillness was not hostile, it was indifferent. Then Thinksy stepped forward. She carried no lantern, no symbol marked her as an arbiter or a judge. She was simply herself. Small, upright, unadorned. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and even, as if she were naming a rule that had always existed. "You are free," Thinksy said, "but there is no throne for you here, and no prison cell." The words landed softly, They did not accuse her of what she had been, they did not promise redemption for what she might become, they described the world as it now stood. Teddy followed, his tone practical, almost gentle in its clarity. "You can stay," he said, "if you know how to be one of us, or you can leave and look for another kingdom to rule." He paused, then added, "But you won't govern our fear anymore." The Queen's gaze drifted across the gathered crowd. She saw Mai, watching with cautious curiosity rather than dread. She saw Shrek, arms folded, solid and unmoved. She saw the animals of the dream worlds. Some wary, some openly puzzled, but none shrinking back. No one looked at her as a prophecy fulfilled. No one looked at her as a nightmare escaped. They looked at her as something ordinary, and that, for the Queen, was worse than hatred. Her shoulders sagged, just slightly, the sharp angles of her posture softened. When she spoke again, the grand resonance, the stage-crafted thunder, was gone. "What am I supposed to be, then?" she asked. The question was not a trap, it was not a demand, it was uncertainty, bare and unguarded. No answer was given, because this, too, was no longer something the world would decide for her. The absence of judgment pressed in. Not as punishment, but as space, and in that space, for the first time, the Queen stood not as a symbol of terror, but as a woman faced with a choice.
Scene 3. A shadow without teeth.
The Queen did not rage. That, more than anything else, unsettled the square. She stood within the open glass chamber, her crown no longer gleaming but dull, as if it had been worn thin by time rather than conflict. The walls around her, once pristine, once symbolic, caught the light without purpose now, reflecting nothing of importance. They were only glass, only structure, only proof that something had ended. For a long moment, she said nothing. The dream worlds did not recoil from her presence, the ground did not harden, the air did not sharpen its breath. If anything, the silence seemed to loosen, like a knot finally allowed to rest. Slowly, the Queen straightened. It was not the proud, towering motion remembered from old stories. It was careful, deliberate, as if dignity itself required effort now. She gathered her cloak around her shoulders, smoothing its folds with a precision that bordered on habit. A queen, performing the last gestures she still knew how to perform. Her eyes moved across the gathered creatures. They did not flinch, they did not bow, they simply made space, not from fear, but from an unspoken agreement that this passage belonged to her. The Queen stepped forward, glass whispered as the chamber door stood open, unguarded, unnecessary. She passed through it without pause, her footsteps soft against the stone. The crowd parted gently, like water around a submerged shape that no longer displaced it violently. No farewell followed her, no curse, no absolution. She walked on. Beyond the square, the dream world stretched toward the forest's edge. The unmapped border where paths thinned and certainty unraveled. The light changed there, filtered and uneven, neither welcoming nor hostile, simply unknown. The queen did not hesitate. With each step, something loosened from the land, not relief. Something quieter, a release of obligation, the weight that had once required a villain to justify fear, to explain pain, to hold blame in a single, convenient form. She carried that weight with her now, not as a threat, as a choice. Behind her, the glass chamber remained, empty, its door hung open, catching the breeze, reflecting sky and dust and nothing else. Already, it looked less like a monument and more like debris. An object that had outlived its meaning, something the landscape would eventually forget to notice. From the edge of the square, Eeyore watched the queen's retreating figure until the trees claimed her outline. "Home," he said at last, tilting his head slightly. She looked old. No one corrected him. At the forest line, shadows gathered. Not menacing, not alive, simply present. The queen stepped into them, and the trees closed without ceremony. No dramatic sound marked her passing, no final chord resolved the moment. The silence did not bloom into hope, nor did it collapse into dread. It simply continued, and in that continuation, the Dreamworlds learned something new. Evil removed was not the same as evil undone, but it was no longer everyone's burden to carry. Somewhere beyond the mapped world, the queen walked on, no longer a symbol, no longer a specter, only a shadow that had chosen to keep moving, and for the first time since the glass had been raised, the land behind her was free to learn how to stand without her shape pressed into it.